And my friends used to say to me, what's your ambition? What do you want? What are you trying to achieve? And I said, one day I want to be the boss of Thomas Cook's. They said, well, you haven't got enough qualifications, you're not qualified, and we don't think that you've got what it takes to work in the travel industry. Because I remember my dad saying to me, oh, now what, you new smart ass. If my dad was really, really honest, if it was up to my dad, we'd still have one shop.
What do you think your mum saw that your dad didn't?
When you've got 19 people around the table saying the answer's yes, and you know the answer's no, but to have the strength, to have the inner strength, the balls to say, you're all wrong, I'm right, and it's a no, and we're going to go with me, that's hard. But that is the sign of strong leadership. I did finally achieve my ambition and get to be the CEO. Even when you're there, it's still a very lonely, very tough existence. And people say you should be careful what you wish for, and that is so true.
Welcome back to the Rich in Success podcast, the show that brings you motivation, inspiration, and education on how you can live a happier, healthier, more successful, and a more fulfilling life. My name is Matt Hall, and today's guest is a fantastic entrepreneur and investor that goes by the name of Mr. Terry Fisher. Now, I actually met Terry for the first time last October. We were both at a business event over in Brighton. And immediately, I was just drawn to Terry's enthusiasm, passion, and kind of his inquisitive nature to keep on learning from everybody in the room. And I was sat next to him like, aren't you the guy that knows everything? Like, knowing what he's done in business. And actually, I think that's one of the keys to success is always believing you can learn, you can grow, and keep on evolving. And that is something for me that is evident in Terry. Now, who is Terry? For those of you who are not aware of Terry, Terry has achieved some astronomical results in business that all started when he was just aged 19, and he set up his first business called Travel World. He set it up on his own with the help of his dad, and that grew in just a matter of years to have 123 stores across the UK with an annual turnover of £100 million. Off the back of that success, many years later, Terry was eventually installed as Thomas Cook's CEO, which saw him manage over 7,000 staff across 1,000 UK-wide stores. And he also became the youngest ever chairman in the Football League when he bought Huddersfield Town and helped them achieve promotion to a higher division, and also the creation of a brand new state-of-the-art stadium. Now, obviously, it goes without saying, I was absolutely delighted when Terry came on this show, and I was not disappointed with what we've created. I truly believe, especially if you are an entrepreneur, or if you're wanting to start up in business, or if you just want to be inspired about being a jolly good, great person, this episode you will love. In the episode, we discuss multiple things, including his main rules in business that he says he never wants to break, albeit he recently broke one of them, and he talks a little bit about that. He also talks about some of the most important traits that Terry believes you need to be a good entrepreneur and leader. He talks about dealing with challenging times in his business and also the loneliness that often occurs as an entrepreneur. And he also discusses having the strength to stand up to what you know to be true, even if everybody around you disagrees. Without further ado, please enjoy episode 164, Make Life-Changing Deals with investor Terry Fisher. Just a quick one before we dive into the episode. I've got a gift for you as a podcast listener. I want to offer you a completely free 14-day trial into my membership. Now, when you join the membership, you get access to over 50 training videos that have been divided into 3 sections. Number 1 is working on your mindset and high performance. Number 2 is business and branding. And number 3 is health and fitness. And that's not all. In addition to working through the modules, you also get to join us for completely live coaching every single month in a group capacity. If you want to take advantage of this free offer now and join us for 14 days, hit the link in the bio and I'll see you there. Now, let's get back to the episode. Okay, well, Terry, thank you for bringing us here. This is a nice pad. You're saying you like London. You stay in London for a bit, right? This is the place.
I've lived probably outside of the UK a lot in the last few years. First I lived in Marbella for 5 years, which is interesting. That was 20 years ago when Marbella was very different to what it is today. And then most recently in LA for 5 years, which I thought at the time was amazing. I thought it was the best place in the world to live. And then kind of came back to London and fell in love with London all over again. So yeah, here we are.
What were some of the highlights of being there, like over in LA? Because that's one of the things people like, it's the dream place to go and that sort of thing. What was the reality?
I think the reality is the perception is the reality.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you've got beautiful sunshine year round.
Yeah.
You've got palm trees, you've got the ocean. You go out in LA and you literally see celebrities everywhere you go.
It's just like normal.
It's just normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, I go back to Leeds occasionally and, you know, you're not going to see many celebrities in Flying Pizza on Street Lane other than you know, the local Leeds celebrities. But literally in LA, you know, you would see A-list celebs sat at the next table. It was that was something that you actually get used to really quickly, and people don't bother them and just let them get on with the life, which is nice. And I guess London's similar. You know, I'm actually rubbish at spotting celebrities, though, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
I'm hopeless.
So you're probably a good person to have around.
So
them.
yeah, you probably see lots of people without even realising it. Yeah.
Well, we've driven here and we've literally passed the Prime Minister's place. There's MI5. We're just like, this is where the big stuff happens.
Yeah, I like to walk a lot. I do a lot of walking and talking. I read Steve Jobs' autobiography a few years ago, and he said that he liked to do walking meetings to keep fit. So I kind of adopted that when I lived in LA, and if anybody wanted to come and see me in my office, I would always say, yeah, let's go for a walk, let's go get a Starbucks or something. And you can do that there because the sun's always shining.
Yeah.
And I've tried to bring that here, and sometimes you get soaking wet. But what's nice about my walk here is to walk into town. I'm literally walking past the House of Parliament, Big Ben, Downing Street, Trafalgar Square.
All the big,
all
monumental
the big,
places.
Yeah, all the big show-stopping sort of scenes that you want to see in London are all between me and walking into town on a morning, which is great. Yeah, I love that.
What I love about your journey is, you know, it didn't start like this. You've very much made your success from the scratch, from the ground up. And I believe when you was younger, you managed to get your parents to give you a loan. First and foremost, how do you do that? Like, how did you convince them? But also the bit I'm interested in is that you know, your dad basically retired off the success of your first proper business. Yeah,
it was a difficult one, Matt, because my dad was a lecturer at university and therefore obviously wanted me to go through that whole sort of schooling, learning.
Yeah, the typical educational path.
Typical educational path that we drill into everybody every day, you know.
Yeah.
You go to school, you do your A-levels, you do your A-levels, you go to university. And
get married, have kids.
It's interesting because I'm actually going through that with my son right now. He's about to leave school. He's just doing his A-levels.
Right.
And I'm trying not to be my dad.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to give him options and say, look, if you want to go to university, then it's a great life and a great opportunity for you to go and do that for a few years. But equally, if you don't, then, you know, I didn't, so I can't, you know, so I'm trying not to be my dad. But going back to my story, so my dad was very disappointed that I didn't. And I left school with very few qualifications. I think I kind of rebelled against the fact that he was a teacher. I think that was part of the issue. Yeah. And I didn't do very well at school. I was popular. Teachers loved me. But as you can imagine, but I didn't actually do very well in my exams.
So you led by personality.
It was always
charm.
Like my school reports would always say like could do better.
Yeah.
You know, if Terry just applied himself, it'd be great. but Terry didn't apply himself, unfortunately.
Or fortunately, right?
Well,
because
yeah,
it's quite a common trait.
as
like
it turned out.
Entrepreneurs, they're looking to go against the grain. They don't want to just conform to what is expected of them. And I think
sometimes as well you need a catalyst. And my catalyst was, so I left school and I went to join a travel and tourism course because I don't know if I've told you this story, but I first went on holiday when I was 12 years old with my parents. And when I was 12 years old, that was quite a long time ago. And not many people went on holiday overseas at that time, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And not many people were doing that kind of travelling then. And literally, when you went on holiday, you had to stand up in front of the whole class at school. And they'd say, Terry's going on an aeroplane. And everybody'd be like, wow, Terry's going on an aeroplane, wow. And then when I
like
came
you're going
back,
to Mars or something.
Yeah, honestly, literally. And then when I came back, I had to stand in front of the whole class again and tell them all about it and what Spain was like and, about paella and sunshine and beaches and the hotel. And I could see the way that the girls were looking at me in the class particularly. And I was like, they're all looking at me like,
I'm sold.
God.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was like me. Right, I definitely want a career in the travel business because if that's how these girls are going to look at me now, then, just imagine.
Like all good ideas, it starts trying to attract girls.
Exactly. I was like 13, 14,
Yeah.
But that started my sort of love affair with travel. Was the fact that within my sort of school group, I was almost like a pioneer. I was doing stuff that they weren't doing, and I wanted to keep that going when I left school. So I joined. I didn't do very well at school, as I said, but I joined a travel and tourism course because I wanted to be a travel agent.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you needed 5 GCSEs to get on this course, and I incorrectly filled out the form to show that I had got 5 GCSEs.
Of course.
But sort of 3 or 4 months into the course, they rumbled me. And I remember being pulled out of a lecture, and I can remember the guy's name. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And he came and he pulled me out of the lecture and he said, "Look, Terry, we really like you, but we're going to have to ask you to leave."
Wow.
I was like, "Why? What's the issue?" And he said, "Well, you haven't got enough qualifications. You're not qualified, and we don't think that you've got what it takes to work in the travel industry. So we're going to ask you to leave." And I literally had to go back in front of the whole class and like embarrassingly pack up my desk and leave the same day.
Wow. And what are you, like 17?
Yeah, I'm 17 and I'm almost kind of like escorted off the premises like a criminal.
Yeah.
Because I'd inadvertently put that I'd got 6 GCSEs when I'd only got 1.5 or something.
Yeah.
And never let the truth get in the way of a good story, right?
Yeah.
But it did on this occasion. It did.
It did.
And so they asked me to leave, and they said, you're not qualified. You won't be able to work in the travel industry. And I think that was the catalyst, Matt. I think that's what really drove me. I think I left there and I went the next day. I remember because I remember my dad saying to me, "Oh, now what are you going to do, smart ass? Told you needed an education. Now what are you going to do?" And I thought, well, it was a bit of a FU moment, really.
Yeah.
And I went the next day and I literally went and knocked on the door of every travel agency in Huddersfield. I lived in Huddersfield at the time. I knocked on every door of every travel agency in Huddersfield, and I found, very fortunately, I found an agency that would take me on as a junior. And I remember starting this job a week after I'd left college and been kicked out of college. And I thought, well, if I can't get in through the college route, I'm going to get in through the ground floor. And I literally got a job in these guys took me on. They took a risk. They took a chance on me. And I got a job stamping brochures and making the coffee and sort of learning the ropes in a travel agency. Like a week after I'd left this travel course,
And then you decided to set up your own eventually.
Well, yeah, I worked for these guys. I worked for these guys for about 18 months, and unfortunately at Christmas, after I'd been there about 18 months, they decided to shut the doors. They decided they couldn't make it viable. The business wasn't viable. Nothing to do with me, I hasten to add.
Naturally.
But I'm kind of like, I'm back at square one. So I've had 18 months of doing something that I've really loved doing. I've really enjoyed it. It's everything I thought it was going to be. And
does that mean you just got loads of girls? Because I'm interested. Because obviously the dream wasn't to be an entrepreneur necessarily. It wasn't to build businesses. Initially, it was just, wow, I'm getting good attention. This looks like something incredible.
I think it was not about the attention. I mean, that's an aside. It was about the traveling was more important. It was like almost like people weren't doing something and I wanted to do it. It was like you were getting into new areas and new territories. And like in that 18 months that I was in that travel agency, I went to Thailand, I went to Bali, I went to Hawaii, Like
Wow.
as
for anyone
as
at that
a 17-year-old,
age,
18-year-old to be doing that 40 years ago,
Phenomenal,
people
yeah.
just weren't doing
No.
it. So that was the excitement, even
Wow.
more so than the adulation from the girls. I mean, I've been used to that my whole life. You know, I can deal with that.
Yeah.
No, seriously though, seriously.
Yeah.
It was more about the travel. It was more about the excitement of seeing new places and going to places that other people, you know, sort of hadn't seen. And when I lost that job, when that business failed, I knew that was my future. I knew I wanted to continue. It wasn't about being an entrepreneur. You're absolutely right.
Right. Okay.
It was literally about working in the travel industry. And in those days, the biggest travel agency company sort of in the world really was Thomas Cook. It was the best known name, the best known brand, the best known business. And my friends used to say to me, you know, what's your ambition? What do you want? What are you trying to achieve? And I said, one day I want to be the boss of Thomas Cook's. And they're like, yeah, okay, but you work in a little travel agency in Huddersfield. I'm like, yeah, but you know, everyone has a dream, and that was kind of my ambition. But to go back to what happened, so I went home after this business failed. I went home and I said to my dad, I said, look, I want to open my own travel agency. It's going to cost $3,000. I found this shop on the outskirts of Huddersfield, and it's going to cost me $3,000, and I need to borrow $3,000. This is 40 years ago. $3,000 was a lot of money then. And I need to borrow $3,000, and I need to open this travel agency. Unfortunately, my mum persuaded my dad to lend me the money. And
so he wasn't really for it.
He was
Still was like, get to uni, learn a proper job.
Yeah, really, seriously. And my mum persuaded him to do it, and we opened. 6 months later, we opened our first travel agency in a small suburb outside of Huddersfield. Yeah.
What do you think your mum saw that your dad didn't?
I think my mum just wanted to put the boys together and just like build some harmony, some unity within the household.
That is so reminiscent of my family household. I'm exactly the same. Yeah. Are you an only child?
Yeah.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
So me and my dad would clash all the time.
Yeah.
So that's my mum always in the middle. Yeah. Like whatever they can get on with, just give him the money.
Yeah. It was kind of like that. It was kind of like that. Just get, you know, let's. Yeah. It was, and unfortunately he did. And not only did he do that, but I was always sort of the front of house, the salesman. I was literally on my own. I had no staff. If I wanted to go for lunch, I had to put a sign on the door saying back in 10 minutes. You know, it was literally like that. And he used to come in on a night and do the payments, right? And effectively became the accountant for the business. And
which again, that's my story with my dad. Well, he became our bookkeeper.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah,
exactly that.
Just doing the day-to-day.
Yeah, he didn't give up his job. He just came in at night after teaching and did all the invoicing.
Got you.
And it got to the stage where one shop became 2 shops, became 22 shops, and he ended up packing his job, his full-time job, and we became partners in the business, and we drove it forward together, which was, you know, really exciting for me.
Yeah. But
also the fact that I could bring my dad into the business, that I kind of turned the whole thing 360 degrees really, and he was coming and working with me, which was phenomenal.
What do you think some of the key things were that enabled you to scale as just you and your dad starting it alone to actually, how many stores did you have in the end when you sold it?
Well, when I sold the business finally, I had 132 stores.
Wow.
But my dad sold, we got an offer when we had about 30 shops. We got someone came along and wanted to buy the business, and my dad wanted to sell and I didn't.
Got you.
And he was in a very obviously different situation to me at the time, and I think I was still only about 25. And what ended up happening was I persuaded the guy who wanted to buy the company to buy half the company, and to keep me.
Yeah, and buy your dad out.
And buy my dad out.
Yeah.
And I think at that time my dad was around 50, and he never worked a day in his life after that. Wow. So him and my mum, you know, they became millionaires, which, you know, again, I'm going back 30 odd years ago.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
How did that make you feel as well?
It was phenomenal. My mum and dad have never worked a day since then. They've had a fantastic life since then.
That's amazing.
That's part of the journey that I really feel most proud of, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be able to do that, particularly for my mum.
Yeah, that's a really quick, you know, what we're talking 6-7 years, you've gone from nothing with one store.
Yeah.
What was the thing? What did you do differently, or what made you stand out? How did you get that growth?
Yeah, so we identified a gap in the market where there was a growing demand for people people were starting to travel more and more and becoming more savvy and more experienced. And people were looking for deals and they're looking for bargains. And in the early days, people used to book a holiday as soon as the brochures came out for the following year.
Yeah.
But we identified a trend where there were people who wanted to go more last minute, and the market didn't really cater for that. And I keep saying this, but we're going back 40 years. The market was very, very different to what it is today.
Yeah.
And we were the pioneers really in sort of last minute holidays, last minute opportunities. You walk into Thomas Cook's and they say, oh, you need to book at least 6 months in advance or 9 months in advance. And, oh no, we don't deal with last minute inquiries and we're too busy for all of that. And literally we were finding that other travel agencies, Thomas Cook's included, were sending people to us saying, oh, you need to go to those people at Travel World. We don't deal with that, but that's what they do. And we were finding a market really where tour operators and airlines had empty stock, but there was nobody trying to sell it for them. And we were literally going to them and buying it all and buying it from them and reselling it to people because nobody else was exploiting that market. So we really found quite a good niche.
So would you say that's kind of like, obviously it's that thing, isn't it? Like opportunity meets preparation. That's good luck. It's that thing of you were out there trying to figure this out, but also the timing of, I think
the timing of the market, the way the market was changing, definitely played into our hands. But I think I identified that need, that demand that wasn't there before. People just weren't doing it. We were literally pioneers in a small village outside of Huddersfield, pioneering last minute holidays. And literally the holiday companies would then ring me and say, look, we've got these seats to Ibiza next Tuesday. Can you help us sell them, please? And we would put an ad in the Huddersfield Examiner, as it was at the time. And literally, I'd get to work I'd put an ad in that night, and I get to work the next day, and there'd be a queue outside the shop.
Wow.
I'm like, we're onto something here.
Yeah.
This is really capturing people's imagination. There's a market for people that want to book a week before, a month before. And now, literally, we book the day before, don't we?
Well, yeah.
You just go to jet2.com and you book a flight the day before,
just
and off you go.
For granted that that's an option.
But
now.
it wasn't, and we kind of created that market, really.
I think going forward to today then, I know a common thing that a lot of startups, a lot of business owners are always looking for and they hear a lot about is how do you identify a gap in the market? And importantly, you hear a lot of people talk about USP, you've got to find your unique selling point. It feels like for a lot of people that's so hard. It feels like a lot has been done before now. What's sort of your advice if somebody's in business that's looking to find that USP, find that gap in the market? Where would be sort of some starting point advice?
I think you've got to be creative and you've got to think outside the box. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but we looked at how can we be different? What's going to make us different? Why are people going to come to us in a village 5 miles out of Huddersfield when there's all the travel agencies in the town centre? So you've got to come up with a different proposition. You've got to find your niche. It's like, most recently, coffee shops. Coffee shops are proliferating everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah.
But what makes one different to the next? Is it the milk that they use? Is it the produce that they're buying in? Is it the fact that they're doing a subscription model? I don't know. You've just got to find something that sets you apart from the guy across the street.
Do you find that easier or harder now when you're working with new companies and you're trying to find how do we make them stand out? That process?
No, I don't think it's any harder. I don't think everything's been done. I think there's still opportunities. I think you've got to find it.
Yeah.
But I was talking to a business recently that I ended up not getting involved in. But I think I came up with a fantastic business model for them in what's an already crowded marketplace to really make them stand out and give them a really good point of difference. So I think you've just got to, you've got to think outside the box, or you've got to go and talk to people, like me or like you that have done this kind of thing before and understand kind of, where the opportunities lie. And I think I'm pretty good at finding those. I've built and sold 6 companies now, and each time, each company's had something different to the marketplace, and I think it's a knack really. But I don't think any business is at the point where it can't find a new opportunity, it can't find a new market. My daughter's just set up a chain of takeaways, and they found a niche. They're just selling Mexican food. Everybody's doing Thai, everybody's doing Indian, everybody's doing Chinese. Mexican is the latest trend, and she's kind of latched onto that and opened 4 in 6 months, and it's really taking off. So it's just about looking at the business that you want to be in, what you're good at, and how can you be different.
What do you think are some of the main traits for leadership? So obviously a big part about scaling a business is getting the right team, hiring the right people, and then being able to sort of, lead the way. When it comes to hiring, when it comes to training, when it comes to leading, what are some of the main traits that you think are essential?
I think you've got to take people with you on the journey. You've got to explain to people what you're doing and why you're doing it. I don't think you can work as a dictator. I think you've got to be collaborator. So I never had a desk situation. I never liked to work behind a desk where you have to come and sit at my desk. I always like to work at a meeting table, and people come and sit around the table and let's share ideas and let's explore ideas. I might be the boss, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm better than you. No, it just means I'm in a better position right now. Yeah. But I've got lots of people that I've worked with in the past that have now gone on to do great things. But I think it's because you collaborate and
you encourage that.
You encourage and you listen and and I think if you're a desk, I'm the boss and I'm sat behind a big desk type person, you're never gonna bring the best out of people. If you collaborate around a round table where nobody's got any hierarchy, I think you do get more out of people for sure. And I think that's always how I've tried to be in business.
Did you always have real self-belief? You said there when you was a young kid, it was like, I want to be the CEO of Thomas Cook. Did you actually believe you could?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, right from the start.
Where do you think that came from?
I don't know. It's because my dad was a teacher, my mum was a housewife. I'm not sure where the drive came from really, but I don't know, just this burning ambition to be. I got the travel bug, as I said, really, really young, and they were the biggest company. And I'm like, well, I want to be the boss of the biggest company. Yeah. I don't think I even thought it through. I don't think I thought what that meant.
Almost like the naivety of youth.
It is the naivety of youth. Yeah. And that's what helped us grow the business, Some of the risks that we took. Yeah. Some of the things we did. When I look back now, I think, oh my God, did we really do that?
Did you have moments where your dad was like,
yeah. And I think my dad would be the first to tell you that he kind of held me back a little bit. Yep. He kept pulling me back in.
Because he had more fear, he was older.
Yeah, and I kept resisting it and pushing back. And I think it was up to my dad. If my dad was really, really honest, if it was up to my dad, we'd still have one shop today and I'd still be working in it. He didn't share that vision. He didn't share that ambition.
I think that's massive though to reflect on, because I think so many people stop at that kind of solopreneur phase, if you like, where they're just self-employed or one business, one shop. And it is, I believe, predominantly just that fear. It's that fear to take a risk, calculated, obviously, but to have that belief. I think that's one of the key components to what enables you to have success.
Well, I think the hardest thing to grow, the hardest thing ever for an entrepreneur, solopreneur, as you said, is to go from one site to two.
That first step.
Once you've ceded control, once you've accepted that you cannot be in those two places 100% of the time. Yes. And you've put somebody else in to effectively run your business. Once you've done that and you've got that mindset, then you might as well have 200 shops, because you've accepted that you can do that. Yeah. And I think a lot of businesses just can't, because they're so
quick one. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of this episode is when you sign up to the membership, you also get access to exclusive interviews with some of the best experts that have been on this podcast. Now, when you listen to this podcast, of course, you're going to hear the inspirational stories and journey that our guests have been on. But when you join the membership, they're going one step further. They are giving you tangible, actionable steps, hacks and tips that you can take from their years of experience and implement into your own life today. To listen to those exclusive members only interviews, start your 14-day free trial right now. Click the link in the bio. Now let's continue with the episode.
What's the word I'm looking for? They're so involved in their own business. They're such control freaks that they can't hand over control to anybody else. And you've got to accept that somebody else is going to run your business, not 100% how you would do it, but if they do it 85% of as you would have done it, you've got to accept that. Yeah. And you've got to encourage them for the 85% that they get right, and not pick them up for the 15% that they get wrong, because then you'll destroy them. Yeah. They're never going to be you. They're never going to do it as good as you. But if they do it 85% as good as you, accept it and don't look for that Don't pick them up on every little thing that they do wrong, because that's going to destroy them very quickly.
Yeah.
But I think that's the key thing for me, is to go from 1 to 2, you might as well go to 200, because you've accepted then that you want to build multiple sites. And a lot of people just can't grasp that.
Yeah. When you're in that position, obviously people do look to you as the person that needs all the answers and all that kind of thing. And one thing that I found is common for a lot of entrepreneurial people is it can be a very misunderstood life, and as a result, a very lonely world to be in. Have you had an experience of that, of feeling like a lot of people don't understand you, and maybe like a lot of your acquaintances are also working with you or for you, and you don't know who to trust as real friends? Have you had anything like that?
I think you're absolutely right. It's a really lonely existence. The reason it's lonely, you can't talk to your friends down the pub because they don't understand what you're doing. You know, we're talking about now a chain of travel agencies that turn over tens of millions of pounds. You can't talk to your mates because they just don't get it. You can't really talk to your parents because they don't share your vision. My dad didn't share my vision. And you can't talk to your staff because they're looking to you for leadership. Yeah. So who can you talk to? You've really got no one to talk to. And to an extent, that's why I kind of started out this mentorship program, was to be able to give entrepreneurs that person to talk to that I never had. Yeah. You know, talk to me, talk to Terry, because he kind of understands, he's been there.
Understands he's a few stages ahead.
Yeah, he's been there, he's been through that process, but it is really lonely. And you know, I did finally achieve my ambition and get to be the CEO of Thomas Cook's, which is, you know, a long story, but I did finally to get there. And even when you're there, it's still a very lonely, very tough existence, because one example I will give you is you've got to be really strong in leadership. You've got to be really believe in your position. You've got to be really hold your position and be really strong and believe in what you're doing. And I remember being sat around a boardroom table, and it happened more than once at Thomas Cook's, where there'd be 20 people around a boardroom table, and they're all clever people. Yeah. And they all deserve to be there in their own right. But when you've got 19 people around the table saying the answer's yes, and you know the answer's no, you know. And it's really easy to then go, do you know what? These 19 people are all clever people. I'm just gonna say it's yes because they all think it's yes, so it must be.
And you get or doubt yourself and just think maybe I'm wrong.
But to have the strength, to have the inner strength, the balls to say, you're all wrong, I'm right, and it's a no, and we're going to go with me. That's hard. That's really hard. But that is the sign of strong leadership. And I've had that happen to me on more than one occasion, and I have been proved to be right. Wow. And I think that's, you know, it's really, really important that you stick to your beliefs, and you don't get sort of caught up with the crowd and believe, oh, well, if they all think it's one thing, then it must be right. You've got to stick to your beliefs. You've got to stick to your guns, and that's, I think, a true entrepreneurial trait.
Have you ever had times where you've struggled mentally with the pressure, with the responsibility, with the loneliness?
So I've built and sold 6 companies, and I've had one failure. And I think I got to the stage where I thought I was impervious to anything going wrong. It was just everything I touched was going to turn to gold. Yeah. And I had a failure, and that really affected me badly. That really did affect me badly because, again, no one to talk to. And it was pretty dark times. I was with a girl actually at the time who was fantastic and really helped me through it and really dragged me through the other side, made me believe in myself again. But that was difficult. And do you know what, Matt? The only time I failed was when I brought in outside shareholders, outside investors. Everything I've built previously, I've kind of built myself with my own money, and I brought in these outside investors, and they ended up falling out with each other, and as a result of them falling out with each other, all then starved the business of capital, and the business failed. So it wasn't any really direct responsibility that fell on my shoulders. It wasn't anything that I'd done particularly badly or made bad business decisions. It was my investors were all falling out over themselves.
But it still knocked your confidence.
Well, I had 120 staff, and the business failed overnight. And you know, you do feel responsibility for all those people and those families and those jobs. And if you don't, then you're not a good human being, are you? Obviously.
Well, and you
so
said
it
there,
affected me really badly.
You obviously had a partner that helped you at the time. how else did you get through that? Like, how did you deal with not only overcoming that emotionally, but then getting back on track and building the confidence again?
It took me a few months. I'll be honest. I went away. I literally went away for 6 weeks, and no contact, no phones. I went on a retreat, just to get my head back together and to, just to regroup with myself. And literally the only people who could contact me during that time were my kids and my mum. That was it. And nobody knew where I was or what I was doing. And I really needed that time. I needed that
What came
6
out
weeks.
of that, almost, I guess, the word that comes to me is silence, like away from the noise.
I learned about meditation.
Did you?
Yeah. And I learned to meditate, and I learned about taking time for myself and about not trying to do everything for everybody else, and lots of really good spiritual things that I carry on through now today, that have really helped me. I met some great people. They didn't know who I was. They didn't want anything from me. And that was nice. You know, like you could just be yourself, and nobody knew who you were, why you were there, what you were doing, what you had, what you'd achieved. I didn't tell people things. I didn't want to be known. You know, I'd owned a football club and been relatively in the local area, relatively high profile, and used to going to places where everybody knows who you are, and you get the best tables, and everybody wants to shake your hand and get your autograph and your photograph. And I went from that to nothing. And
is there a big downside to that? Like, I always think that when you're really well known, there is that feeling potentially that they'll know me, but I don't know you. You know, they know that I can provide for them the opportunities, but I don't know if they're, genuine people. When I guess then taking yourself away, presumably that was a real big relief.
It was a really big relief. It was a fantastic 6 weeks, and I also I'll do it again sometime, but
never get around to it.
Yeah.
Well, is that something you're guilty of, not putting yourself
I think
first?
so. Yeah, I think so. Very much. Yeah, very much. So you don't. I think as an entrepreneur, as an investor, you're always putting yourself second to the businesses that you're involved in. And I, sometimes I try and switch off, and I'll say, let's go for a nice quiet dinner, and I end up on the phone all night. Yeah. And the people I'm with will say, well, I thought we were going for a nice quiet dinner. I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of this deal, or I'm in the middle of doing that. It's difficult. But I think taking that time out was really, really important, particularly on the back of this failing. It helped me to regroup, and it helped me to get my shit together again, really.
Would you swap it, that lifestyle, that constant being in demand, needing to find solutions to problems?
Do you know what? I've got a fantastic lifestyle, and I've got everything to be happy about. I've got a beautiful home here, and I've got a great lifestyle. But I am envious at times of people who have a 9-to-5 job, and they literally leave their job at 5 o'clock and they don't think about it till the next morning, and they can go home and they can forget all about work, and they've got a lovely wife and a lovely family, and they're very happy in their own world, and they don't want for all of this, and they're not striving, and they're not trying to pay huge bill. It's the same life, but on a different level, different scale. Yeah. And I am actually at times I'm envious of my parents. My dad sold out and checked out and never worked again after he was 50. And at times I used to look at him and think, why aren't you driven? Why don't you want to do something else? Why don't you want to build another business? But then I look sometimes and think I'm actually quite envious of the time that they have and the life that they've got.
What's the answer then? Who's got it right?
I think being happy is the answer. I don't think you need the stuff to make you happy. Stuff doesn't make you happy.
No.
I think being happiness is more about who you're with, about your family, about your friends. And yes, it's nice to have a beautiful apartment and to be able to go on amazing holidays and to go to any restaurant you want and not worry about what it's going to cost. But at the same time, that you're paying a price for that. You are paying a price for that. Yeah. And maybe these people will live longer, or they'll have, in their ways, they'll have happier lives. I don't know. But I'm on this treadmill now, and once you're on it, you can't get off it. That's the problem. Once you've seen all of this, once you've had all of this,
going backwards.
I go and see my mum and dad in Harrogate, and they've got a lovely house, but they don't aspire to the sorts of things that I aspire to, and they don't get it, and they don't want it. And in a way, that's quite nice.
But presumably, some of your happiness comes from that. For as much as there's a trade-off and there's a quote-unquote sacrifice to having more and there's responsibility, presumably that journey of striving for the next thing, discovering the next talent and investing in it, a lot of happiness comes from that, right?
It does. And when I met the guys from Voicey, which is the business that we sold recently to Snapchat,
we need to hear that story as well.
When I first met those guys, I mean, I said to them, the three boys from Norway, three coders really from Norway,
Yeah.
and I said, look, what does success look like? And they said, if we can make $1 million each out of this business, we'll be absolutely delighted. You know, we live a modest lifestyle. We live in Norway.
And just for the listeners, what was this app that we're developing?
Voicey was a music app. It was kind of an Instagram for music. It was an app where you could download music that you'd written, and then performers could interpret that music in different ways. And you could like it, you could share it. It was kind of like an Instagram for music. And the developers, the three boys from Norway, as I said, the limit of their ambition really that was $1 million each. They could make $1 million each. That was all they could possibly wish for.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting journey. It was a business that I've got a partner that I invest in things with, and he and I sort of bootstrapped the business from the start. And along the way, we could see the potential in this business. We thought it had great potential, but we couldn't get any of our friends to buy into it. And each time we tried to do a funding round, we ended up funding it ourselves. And it was really infuriating. We just couldn't get anybody else to see what we saw in these.
Why do you think that was?
In these guys, I think the fact that it was in Norway, and I think it was a niche product, and at the time there were lots of other things that you could invest in. It just wasn't particularly sexy at that time, but we saw something in it that we thought was really had a value. And sometimes you need a little bit of luck as well in these things. You know, you don't know the answer to all the questions. Yeah. Sometimes you just get lucky. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And we were lucky. You know, we saw that, and the people, friends of mine that I'm still friends with today, that I tried to get to invest in it, that just didn't see it, and now kicking themselves, obviously.
Yep.
Big time. But yeah, you know, you could say, well, you know, were you clever with that business? Were you lucky with that business? I mean, I think there was an element of both. Yeah. And the timing for us, you know, lots of, and I don't take, I've got to be careful how I put this across, but during the pandemic, there were lots of businesses that really struggled. Yeah. Really, you know, people lost their businesses, they lost their homes. There's some really, really sad stories. But equally, there's some people who did very well out of the pandemic. And Voicey was one of those businesses that, because of the lockdown, because people were stuck at home, our user numbers went through the roof. You know, we were getting 1 million users a month before the pandemic, and getting 1 million users a day during the pandemic. Wow. So and it just went off the charts. Yeah. And from not being able to get any of my friends to literally to put 25 grand into it, to having Snapchat, Spotify and Facebook all wanting to buy it within 6 months. You know, we were in and out of Snapchat, of Voicey to Snapchat within 18 months from start to finish. Wow. And those boys whose dream, whose ambition was for $1 million, ended up with considerably more money than they could ever possibly dream of, and now live in California, working for Snapchat with tens of millions of dollars in the bank accounts. Wow. And it was just a phenomenal journey. But there was a huge slice of luck in that people were stuck at home looking for something to do. And literally they were posting on social media, you know, people were saying, if it wasn't for Instagram, Snapchat and Voicey, I'd never get through this pandemic. If it wasn't for Facebook and Voicey, I'd never get through this pandemic. Yeah. And I'm like, are we seriously being talked about in the same sentence as these massive companies? And we were. And to be able to sell it to one of the biggest social media companies in the world was incredible. And beyond those guys' wildest dreams. But Jason, my partner, and I, we did see that. We saw the opportunity, and along the way we were offered $10 million for the business, which would have sort of made these guys a couple of $1 million each, and they genuinely wanted to take the money. They wanted to sell it, and I had to be really, really strong and say to them, we're going to get a lot more money for this business. Just hold your nerve.
Was that just experience, or did you see
experience,
something?
It was experience, it was knowledge, it was seeing where the market was going. Yeah. It was seeing the growth in the numbers. we were talking to a third party, a friend of mine who's very, very well connected in the music industry.
Yeah.
And he got massive music industry people really interested in investing in the business, not necessarily buying it, but investing in the business. And I could see where that was going. And that was the smart part. And the luck part was obviously the lockdown sort of usage spike. But we could see where that was going. And these Norwegians, I mean, they literally, Matt, they fell out with me. They stopped talking to me because I wouldn't let them take $2 million each.
You're friends again now.
Yeah, you can imagine. But yeah, I was literally off the Christmas card list because I wouldn't let them sell the business.
Wow.
And we had blocking rights. Jason and I had blocking rights to stop them selling it.
Got you.
And they really, really fell out with me massively because they're saying like, we can make $2 million each here. And it's twice as much as we could ever possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're missing the big
We're
picture,
not even
guys.
getting started yet.
Yeah, missing the big picture. And in the end, they made over $20 million each, you know. And I'm eternally grateful, and now living in California, and kids are in school, wives are in yoga pants, and they're living in the sunshine. You know, it's a great story, but there was an element of luck, but there's also an element of experience and expertise to stop them, almost save them from themselves, really. That's what we did. Yeah. But my friends that I asked to put sort of 25 grand in 2 years ago that would have taken over £1 million off the table, you know, I'm not sure if they're still friends.
Not properly. We've got to finish the Thomas Cook story. The dream as a child was to become CEO. Presumably it's a complex, long story, but how did you make it happen? What was the...
There was a lot of stepping stones along the way.
Yeah.
I ended up selling my travel world business to a company called Going Places. And Going Places was the number 2 company in the UK behind Thomas Cook's. And I became CEO of Going Places. And my friends would say to me that, so you know, that's your ambition achieved. You know, you become CEO of Going Places, that's the number 2 business in the UK, surely that's enough. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not Thomas Cook's, is it?
That ambition's still there.
I'm not quite there.
Yeah.
And I actually sold out of my stake in Going Places and went to live in Marbella for 5 years. And I thought I was done with the travel industry. And then an ex-business partner of mine from years earlier had a travel company that was in trouble. And he asked me to come in and help him and turn the business around and prepare it for a sale. And it's a very long story for another day, but I did that. I went back in. I moved from California. So I went from Marbella to California, and then from California, from LA to Preston in Lancashire. And I used to say to people, I get on the freeway in the morning, and on the freeway it says left to San Diego and La Jolla, and right to Santa Monica and Beverly Hills. And now I get on the M62 and it says left to Hull and Grimsby and right to Rochdale and Bolton. And
it's a little bit different.
It's a little bit different.
Shock.
It's a little bit different, but I saw the opportunity in this business. It's called Gold Medal Travel. I saw the opportunity in Gold Medal, and I took the chance and I took the opportunity, and I moved my family back from California back to Leeds, and to turn this business around. And we ended up selling the business to Thomas Cook's 3 years later, and I ended up with a seat on the board of Thomas Cook's, and ultimately ended up achieving my ambition at Thomas Cook's. And you know, people say you should be careful what you wish for, and that is so true, because I kind of got there and I achieved it, but it wasn't kind of what I wanted it, what the dream. It wasn't how I'd imagined it all to be in my mind over all those years. When I finally got there, it was very corporate. It was very driven by the city. It was very much reporting. It knocked all the entrepreneurial spirit out of me very quickly.
All the creativity.
Yeah, and it wasn't quite what the dream wanted, but I had ultimately fulfilled my ambition, and I had to do that. You know, I really had to do that, and to be able to do it and to say I've done it, and it's not what I want going forward, ultimately. But I got there, and I was so creative, I was so motivated, I was so driven that I ended up actually quitting the board and trying to buy the company, because I could see what was possible. But all these suits, all these corporate guys were stifling the opportunity, and I could see the opportunity. So I ended up quitting the board and the role, and trying to raise the money to buy Thomas Cook's, and actually wanted to own it ultimately and take it one stage further.
But that didn't happen.
Unfortunately, we raised the money,
Yep.
and it's well documented. We raised £500 million to make a bid to buy Thomas Cook's, and the board turned down the offer, and 18 months later the business failed.
And do you think that's one of the biggest reasons? It's that kind of corporate mindset, like you say, people in suits, they needed that entrepreneurial vision.
Yeah, they didn't see it. I mean, they were, the market had changed, the travel industry changed massively. They still believe that you needed 1,500 travel agencies on the high street, and you needed to own hotels and aeroplanes. And I was all about, let's massively reduce the high street footprint. Let's sell the airline and buy seats off all these low-cost carriers that we can't compete with, that are all emerging. Let's do the same with the hotels. We don't need to own hotels. We can buy beds. There's hotels opening all over the world. We can go in and buy the beds. And let's put all the money from that into building the best online travel agency business in the world. And that's kind of what Expedia did, and so all these other people that have come along now that just didn't exist in those days. You had
the idea before it was really happening anywhere else.
We had that idea, we had that opportunity. That's where I wanted to take Thomas Cook's. And unfortunately, the board didn't share that vision. They wanted to keep buying more airplanes and buying more hotels and opening more shops.
What they've always done.
Yeah. And unfortunately, history will show that they were wrong, and the market had changed massively, and they just didn't change with the times, and they became dinosaurs.
Sad.
Yeah, very sad. It's a great brand. Very sad to see it go.
So on one of your recent blogs, you said sometimes as an entrepreneur, you need to trust your gut, and sometimes you make bad decisions. You said something along the lines of, some of the best investments we make, or we get known for. What was the phrase? Sorry,
it's the businesses that you don't know that define you. It's the businesses that you don't do. Sometimes I look at lots of opportunities, and some I go with, but a lot I don't. And sometimes you're defined by the things that you don't do. And
you said every day is a school day, and even recently you've had that experience where you can learn even at this stage. And I saw you wrote here, not allowing yourself to get carried away and break your own rules.
Yeah, so I did get carried away. I got carried away by a couple of guys, young guys, who reminded me a lot about myself when I was their age, who were really keen, really enthusiastic, really driven, pushing really hard. And I agreed to help them and to effectively become chairman of a business before we'd finalise all the terms, before we got everything down on paper, before the lawyers had finalised the contract.
Yeah.
And I should know better. I should know. With all my experience, I should know better than that. And that's what I mean by say every day is a school day, because I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes. Unfortunately, when it came down to sort of finalising it and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, we couldn't agree terms. And I'd gone out there, publicly and on my profiles and on my Instagram and on my LinkedIn, and I'd promoted this business to everybody that sort of respects my thoughts and my decisions and supports me. And then I had to go back sort of a little bit sheepishly and say, actually, I'm not doing this anymore.
Moving on.
yeah. Onwards and upwards.
Yeah.
And I should have known better. And I'm still learning, even at my age.
What are some of those rules, some of the other rules, when you now know, right, I've got to always come back to, when I'm making key decisions, don't break these specific rules?
I think, I'm a people person. I always back people. So Jason, who's my business partner, is much more detailed. He looks at the financials. He wants to scour the numbers. He wants to interrogate the hell out of the accountants. Whereas I want to meet the individuals and look them in the eye and say, look, is my money safe with you? Do I believe your story? What's driving you? What's your ambition? So I think for me the golden rule is liking the people and believing the people, and then secondarily obviously interrogating the business plan and understanding that it's got an opportunity, it's got a chance.
It's finding that sweet spot in the middle. It's not just backing the people with a terrible idea.
Yeah, exactly.
And vice versa.
Exactly. But I think making sure that I'm not detail driven enough, and that's what I've learned. Making sure that the ink's dry on the contract before you go out and tell the world about it, I think is really, really important.
Terry, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Hearing your story is so inspiring, and I'm sure everybody listening has been inspired today. Just before we finish, where can people find you? They need to keep up to date. I know you've got a blog that I do want to mention that is brilliant, especially for entrepreneurs wanting to learn from a guy who admittedly still makes mistakes but learns fast, right? He's constantly learning. Yeah, where can people find you?
So I've got a website, terryfisher.com. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, so any of those mediums really. And it's always nice to get feedback. It's always nice to hear from people. So you can't help everybody and you can't answer every message, but it's still nice to get the feedback and the messages. So.
And you see me going a bit down the personal branding route. Is that something you're aware of, is showing up on social media and utilising that now at this stage in your kind of
I never thought
journey?
I never thought I'd be sort of the grey-haired chairman. That was always my dad. But unfortunately, I've got to that age.
Time's passed.
Yeah, it has really. And unfortunately, I've got to that age. But I do feel as though I do want to help young entrepreneurs, and if I can give a little bit back. I do quite a bit of pro bono work. I don't charge everybody for everything that I do. If I see opportunities to help people that genuinely need help and don't have the money, then I'll, I don't want to say that and get inundated again with requests, but I do where I can sort of try to help. But yeah, I think I've got a lot to offer. I said I've had 6 successful exits, 1 unsuccessful business that I learned a lot from. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot from that lesson. So I do, I'm working as a non-exec on a couple of boards. I'm investing in a few different companies. So I'm always open to opportunities and always still available for mentoring as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to have to go because Terry has kindly agreed to do a bonus members only interview where we're going to go for some specific tips. But just before we finish, the final question I ask all guests is, what is your definition of success?
I think it's changed over the years, Matt, if I'm honest. I think it was making money. When I was younger, I think it was all about making money and buying things and having things, stuff, as we call it.
Society tells us it is, right?
And honestly, happiness. Just be happy. Get to a level that you're happy and stick with it, because sometimes striving for more and more doesn't give you the happiness that you think it's going to.
Amazing. Terry, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now, that's not all. If you want to hear more from Terry has very kindly agreed to do a members-only exclusive interview in which he gives you the number one thing that he believes all business owners must focus on. He also goes into a bit of depth about why this is and gives an example in his own life. Here's a little preview for you to check out.
I think the really important thing when you're starting any business is to know your exit.
So I think this is a real kind of perspective shift that I think for a lot of people will be like, I've not thought of it like that.
But I think if you want to grow a business and you want to build a business and you're looking to make a lot of money and exit in 3 to 5 years, then I think you need to understand.
To listen to that exclusive bonus members only interview right now alongside all the other additional bonus interviews, click the link to join us in the membership or head on over to richinsuccess.com, click on the membership area via that website, and I will look forward to seeing you in there. And one thing I've not mentioned, look, I know people hate adverts, people hate being sold to, but please do hear the words that I'm speaking, because I honestly believe I don't rave enough about this membership. I also honestly believe the membership has the potential to go on to be one of the most valuable, life-changing memberships out there in the market. And I don't just say that through hype or because it's my business, but this is a project I've been working on for years, and I've done so doing an awful lot of market research, joining other memberships and trying to put together what I believe is the very best membership out there. And one of the things that I think makes it the best is the people. And I always talk about the thought leader Jim Rohan's quote, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And in there, you've got a variety of people, including, their personal trainers, other coaches, authors, and ultimately people that are on a genuine mission to be the very best they can be. So I think being around them, it teaches me great things every single week. And I think that is one of the most important, powerful reasons why our membership is one of the strongest on the market. Remember, you can start your trial completely free right now. Just click that link. You'll get 14 days free. And then if you want to stay a member, if you see this value I'm talking about, it costs you just £29 per month. Do not delay. Take action. Stop procrastinating. Click the link, and I'll look forward to seeing you in there. And I will also look forward to seeing you as you join us again on the next episode of Rich in Success, as the journey of self-discovery and personal growth continues. Thank you for listening.